politicians, sit yourselves down, there's nothing for you here. Won't you please come to Chicago for a ride?
Yo, now let me start by saying that the gap between the rich and the poor is greater than it ever has been before. We at war for our rights, can't even get a living wage. Profit up our education system, take our schools away. Who has a say in what goes? Only big money corporations try to run this nation. Hell nah, we won't go. So we in these streets screaming.
Saying downtown makes $4 billion a year. Workers make an average of $980. There's a problem there.
Of the population in America, that's probably why they scared of us. They don't want us to have unity.
We don't act like it, but we're living under a feudal system where just a small minority controls all the wealth.
Bang, bang, the violence just won't die in a city where we make 825. We work like a slave.
I knew why they were doing what they were doing. It was me actually being in the moment, taking action for something that I thought was wrong.
We getting nothing, they making you don't be distracted.
So it's not an effective penalty, and employers do the math and they look around and see that it makes financial sense to break the law, fire somebody illegally, and wait for a slap on the wrist that is likely never to come.
Politicians, sit yourselves down, there's nothing for you here.
The federal minimum wage has stagnated. It used to be worth, in 1968, its peak value was, I haven't done the inflation adjustments lately, but it's something like $12.25 or $12.50 an hour in current day dollars. The minimum wage erodes through inflation, right? So you have to keep raising the minimum wage just to hold your ground. And every day you don't, it basically is worth less and less.
The Fight for 15, to me, really shows that there's a sign of hope, that people are willing to do things. There needs to be something done, that people that have been working at a company for 10 plus years are still making, bare bones, and the company doesn't seem to have any appreciation for them more than just to give them a pin that says, hey, thanks for being here for 10 years, and that's it. That's the end of it.
To me, the Fight for 15 basically means that I can live a normal life happily without worrying about living paycheck to paycheck.
Is to have a livable wage of $15 an hour and eradicate the minimum wage that is given, which is $8.25, which hasn't gone up in 2 years. That is our goal, that is our drive, demanding our respect for the jobs that we have.
The Fight for 15 is kind of, I think, the birth of a new movement in a lot of ways. The labor movement has given us a lot. It's given us the 8-hour workday. It's given us healthcare. It's given us benefits on the job, safety. And at the same time, CEO salaries are rising exponentially. And in fact, if the minimum wage had kept pace with the rise of CEO salaries since the 90s, people would be making like $23 an hour. But they're not, right?
Frankly, the Fight for 15, the WOCC, is a new approach to an old problem.
There was a union formed last fall, in the fall of 2012, with food and retail workers in the city of Chicago. Initially, the idea had come when CTA bus prices were being raised, and a group named Action Now, which is one of Stand Up Chicago's community partners, was doing surveys asking people in terms of how would they handle the increase in the bus fare. So, what they found with people's responses is constantly the cost of living is going up, but my wages aren't. My wages are remaining stagnant, right? So at this time, they said, hey, we may be on to something. And this led into conversations with workers and people really being agitated in terms of what can we do.
The campaign is really powerful. The reason it's called the Workers' Organizing Committee of Chicago is that it began to look at a geographic area, downtown Chicago, saying downtown makes $4 billion a year. Workers make an average of $980. There's a problem there.
I think the WOCC also does a very important thing by trying to organize retailers where customer service is an important thing. There's probably a better opportunity to get employers to see your side of the story when they're dependent on employees to be the face of the business. right? When part of what you make as workers is service and customer service. So among other things, I think that's some of what the WOCC does well.
The idea was that downtown is the part of the city that makes the most. All the tax money goes down here, the tourists come here, and the businesses are booming. And yet the people who work downtown are the ones making the least in the whole city, and coming from the hundreds, coming from way up north, coming from the west side, 2 hours to work, and then going home another 2 hours with hardly anything in their pockets, right?
It's exhausting, man, to be honestly truthful with you, and I'm part-time. Usually a week, I work 25 to 30 hours, sometimes even more. And then you combine that with school, it's exhausting. It's really exhausting.
I love customer service about my job. I do not like the way that corporate is run when it comes to retail and fast food. It's a dirty dog-eat-dog system. We're just pawns and they're just getting a check and we're not even getting what we put in.
I was like, the heat don't work. We're not getting any raises. They're working us like dogs. You know what I'm saying? They're strict, you know.
I'm curious, do you get health benefits?
I do. At 400 hours, which I just made, at 400 hours, health insurance becomes available to me for $98 a check, which to me is not worth it at the time because I can't afford that. I'm already having trouble as it is, and I can't afford to take off $100 every check.
So tell us how you were approached and recruited by the WOCC.
One of my coworkers is a part of it, and he's been going to the protests and going to the meetings.
But I had a friend. She was basically a part of Occupy Chicago, which is a little bit, their campaign is a little bit more different. They were the ones last year out there at NATO, the summit. Basically, I went up to her because I was denied a raise, or not denied, but they told me, hey, nothing was instilled for a raise. So basically, I was there for over a year and didn't receive anything.
I was approached and recruited by WOCC way back in August. Like I was there when it started and we only had 6 people.
You know, when I found out that most corporate executives are making far more in profits than they have in previous years, it made it a lot more easy. It made it a lot easier to join up with this and say, okay, something's not right here. This needs to change.
And she was just like, you know, you can do something about it. And I was just like, what? She was like, yeah, you know, hit up this organizer. She gave me her number. I'm like, all right, cool. And the organizer hit me up. And she was like, so I heard you want to change the conditions. I'm like, yeah. And she was like, well, let's meet up.
So the idea was, how can we bring downtown Chicago together to see that power? Instead of like usual unions that work in a single hospital or a single sector, this is about a whole area where people deserve more, where there's an injustice being done, right?
Efforts to organize workplaces in the U.S. face such a fundamental uphill battle because employers are basically allowed to break the law and fire or discipline people for trying to form a union. That any new approach is worth looking at. And the WOCC does several valuable things. For one, by focusing on an area of the city, you're forming new alliances that you don't often see in more traditional organizing campaigns built around a single workplace. So when you meet with folks in the WOCC, you're meeting with a lot of dynamic people. And by casting a wider net and going across a lot of workplaces, you're getting a lot more energy in the movement.
So in order to create a real movement, not just an organization, the WOCC has joined with Stand Up Chicago, and Stand Up Chicago is a community organization / labor kind of coalition of different organizations from all over the city who have come together for this common vision of creating a fairer economy.
Stand Up Chicago is a collaboration between community organizations, faith-based groups, as well as labor groups that come together and fight for social justice. The difference between Stand Up Chicago and WOC, they are community partners. WOC is the Workers Organizing Committee of Chicago, whereas Stand Up Chicago is the collaboration between community groups, and WOC is one of our community partners.
for management to threaten you. They just start to say to you, oh, you know, you get involved in that union. Guess what? You ain't getting paid now. That's illegal.
My name is the Reverend Liz Munoz. I'm the associate priest here at St. James Cathedral. The way that the WOCC came to having their meetings here is that we have a mutual friend, shall we say, CJ Hawking from Arise Chicago. She's the executive director there. And Arise Chicago is a group of faith leaders and laity who believe that take seriously what we believe, well, they take seriously what the Bible says, which is about justice and economic equality. 90% of the Bible is all about that. I know that some of my more fundamentalist sisters and brothers want to say that it's all about sex. It is not. It's about economic justice.
And so we have teams working Water Tower on State Street, all over fast food downtown. But then the idea of like kind of what gives birth to a new labor movement or what gives people new ideas of power is that we're not just focused on what happens at work, because especially with these jobs, people are transitioning in and out. It's about your communities. It's about the violence that happens in the street down from your kid's school. You know, it's about going on Link. It's about the potholes in your street. It's about the transportation costs, right? And all that is linked to how much you make, how much downtown workers make.
Earlier this year, walk workers had marched to the Westin Hotel to tell the Business Association for the Magnificent Mile, essentially, we wanted a seat at the table.
Poverty kills.
Poverty has created 500 deaths in Chicago. You agree, Bill?
Survive on these poverty wages. We need a living wage, and these guys can help us.
You can help. You can be a part of the solution. We're asking you to sit down with us to be a part of the solution, right?
What was gained from the march that the workers had taken part of when they marched to this dinner banquet for the Greater North Michigan Avenue Association was workers were able to truly see, experience, and hear the power of their voices. They heard the workers. They accepted the letter. And they knew that the workers meant business. And at least they were very aware that these workers were concerned, not only for themselves, but for their families and for their communities, and they deserved a living wage.
I want to introduce the problems low-wage workers and retail workers are facing to the public, and want to get beyond the trap of just low wages, because I think sadly the fact is that a lot of people hear low wages as the just rewards for marginal and low contributions within a fundamentally fair labor market. There's a certain slice of the population that when they hear low wages, they assume low worth and value to the worker. One of the important things that the WOCC members are able to convey is that the labor market is not fundamentally fair, that these workplaces have few of the rights to which ordinary and white-collar workers consider themselves to be fundamentally entitled, including reliable schedules, time and a half pay for overtime, paid vacation, paid sick leave, and frankly the right to work in an environment that's not full of constant intimidation. So the report looks at the big picture of inequality and where the good jobs have gone in Chicago, and at the same time tries to expand on our idea of what's a good job. Because the minimum wage matters, but it's not enough. And there's a whole bunch of other things that should be on the table to make working and living more valuable for probably about a third of the population.
Now how you feel? CEOs getting mega paid while you barely making minimum wage. The first time I put that pen to a page, when I realized I couldn't be the government slave. I got the same attitude from back in the day. Now I got bigger bills, bigger problems to deal with, but I'm still sick. Lance Armstrong, being broke is a position that ain't that comfy.
Grab tu familia y dile a lucha. Estamos peleando todos los diablos que son nuestros jefes y gobierno. No podemos rendirnos, somos de Detroit, Chicago. This life is hard, so hard I must go. So-called oppressors know we're at your throat. This life is hard, so hard I must go. 825, hell no, we can't go.